breaking news. The Russian and Belarusian athletes have now been banned from the Winter Paralympic Games.
Yes, in a statement this morning, the IPC president, Andrew Parsons, said an overwhelming number of members told them if they did not reconsider the decision to let those athletes compete, it would have grave consequences for the Games. The opening ceremony, of course, in Beijing tomorrow.
Yeah. Clearly, they have bowed to the pressure of the other competing nations. We're joined now to discuss what's transpired over the last 15, 20 minutes by Paralympians Richard Whitehead and Ali Jawad. Thank you both for joining us. Richard, if we can start with you. I mean, that's quite a turnaround, isn't it? Sort of, you know, when we conceived the fact we were going to discuss this, it was about whether the British team should boycott, whether they should be there or not. That decision no longer has to be made by the British athletes, does it? Because, of course, finally, the IPC have decided that the Russian and Belarusians can't compete. That's the right decision from your perspective?
Yeah, morning, Susanna. Morning, Ben. I'm sorry we're having to talk in these terrifying times. And the IPC initially shirked their responsibility by placing the decision more towards the national governing bodies and individuals, where this decision should have been made for the athletes, for the movement. And us as a Paralympic athlete, as disabled people, we want to represent ourselves with equality and inspire people through the power sport. We use our platforms to hopefully liberate people, and we want to support the Ukrainian people that have been displaced and the Ukrainian nationals as well. And the right decision has finally been made.
Richard, if they had allowed these athletes to compete as neutrals, you had said that we as GB should boycott the Games. It looks like it's that sort of threat which has led to them reconsidering.
Yeah, and when we talk about politics and sport not mixing, I think this environment we're in at the moment gives us the platform to openly talk about the importance of not just sport but life. And this isn't about winning medals. This is about understanding that the people in Ukraine at the moment are being displaced. There's premature babies that are in shelters that are being bombed overnight. I want to support the Ukrainian people that are in the UK that I represent when I put that tracksuit on, and I wouldn't have competed in Beijing to support those people and to show solidarity for all people in the UK and all people over the world.
Ali, what's your reaction to this turnaround? Because this is quite dramatic, particularly in light, as Susanna said, the opening ceremony is tomorrow evening. So these Belarusian and Russian athletes undoubtedly will be there.
I think it's absolutely the right decision. I still can't believe that it's taken countries to threaten to boycott for the IPC to make the right decision. They stated yesterday that due to their framework, legally they couldn't ban Russia and Belarus. So for me, they should have changed their constitution and their framework to give them the power to ban countries in extraordinary circumstances. And yesterday they failed to do that. And it's taken countries to threaten to boycott for them to act, and that's not been enough.
There's a really important part of the Paralympic movement, both whether it's Winter Games or Summer Games, and you both represent this so brilliantly, is that we get to watch you compete and revel at your athleticism, your strength and your ability in these communities, you know, and look at you with your disability and whatever that might be, and still marvel at how extraordinary you are as athletes. And undoubtedly, one of the things that is clear in Russia is that people with disability is still considered to be something quite shameful, and the disabled members of their society are often hidden away. And actually, there's a shame here, isn't there, that these athletes, these Paralympic athletes, aren't going to be able to compete and be seen because, of course, they face a lot of oppression where they are back home.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we talk about the power sport, it definitely gives you a platform for the greater good. But I've heard lots of messages of indoctrination within the Russian community, and messages that the Russian athletes are sending Ukraine athletes about bombing their homes. And I feel that to take the Russians and Belarus athletes straight out of the village and send them home is the right decision, like Ali says. I'm passionate about sport, but also I feel that myself and athletes like Ali are humanitarians in our own right, and we need to promote sport in the right means and on a level playing field, it's really important that we galvanise as a community and with our platforms kind of really stand up for the greater good.
Richard, sorry, can you just elaborate a little? Did you say that you'd heard about messages being passed from Russian Paralympians to Ukrainians?
Yes, that's right. I've seen those, and
what do they say?
Yes.
Without revealing anybody's names.
Bombing their families back at home, and it's like terrible. Like, it's just disgusting behaviour, and it just shows that the Russian and Belarus athletes don't actually think there's a war going on at home, and how that affects not just the athletes but also the Ukrainian community. We need to galvanise as athletes and promote that, look, this war needs to stop, and sport is only just a small part of what we do.
Ali, it is remarkable, isn't it, as you say, that that the International Paralympic Committee has bowed to pressure from the threat of boycotts from other teams. I know that you weren't in favour of GB athletes who have worked so hard to get to this point, then boycotting the games, because it shouldn't be down to other teams to pull out. Why do you think it took the IPC so long to come to this decision? Because we've seen the same situation with FIFA and football.
I think sport tries to be neutral. Unfortunately, in this circumstance, it's impossible to be neutral. And unfortunately, we know that Russia, they promote sport in a way that furthers their international agenda. And that's why I wasn't in favour of them competing. However, when it comes to boycotting, I wasn't in favour for Paralympics GB to boycott, because you have to remember, these athletes, it's not their fault.
Yeah.
And for the IPC to put them in that position is wrong. And I feel like whatever structure or framework they have legally, they need to go away and change that, because they cannot allow this to happen again. If the rules are not robust enough for extraordinary circumstances like this one, then we've got a real problem.
Because he said, didn't he, initially, he said they've handed down the strictest rules that they possibly could under their guidelines, which was them representing under a neutral flag or under the Paralympic flag, rather than sort of being banned from...
Ben, I think it shows really weak leadership. Yeah. I think the IPC should have not pulled the IPC and their movement and the athletes through the mud and really stood up for what we stand for, and equality is one of the core values of the IPC. Yeah. And they took the easy route out, going back to their handbook of distancing themselves from politics. And like Ali said, under these circumstances, we really need to come together and use this games now to unite everybody, and the Paralympic community is part of that, and show the people of Russia that what is happening now is happening, and it's terrible. And my heart goes out to all the Ukrainians in the UK, as well as the ones that are displaced and under fire at the moment.
It sounds also, Richard, from what you're saying, that the Ukrainian Paralympians can now compete without that sense of intimidation.
Yeah.
You know,
I wonder though, from both your perspectives, Ali, from the Team GB Paralympic GB that are out there, how hard is it for them to be able to get into the space where they're going to have to compete when they know what is going on in Ukraine? Because that's a huge factor, isn't it? Let alone the Ukrainian athletes and Paralympic athletes who will have undoubtedly friends and family that are in the country still.
Yeah, look, this is the ultimate distraction. And a lot of athletes, they're going to struggle in terms of coping with the outside pressures of, you know, people calling for a boycott, and also not knowing what the IPC are going to do. And then kind of also that decision yesterday as well. There's a lot of scrutiny on them. However, you know, and then you've got COVID on top. The rules there are very, very strict. They're in a bubble. So you have to factor that in too. So look, Paralympics GB, they've got the best support staff, you know, in the whole world. We're a team, we're a family, and I'm sure they'll deliver if they have to. They're adaptable and they're flexible. However, they know that these games are going to be remembered for the IPC's decision. initially not to ban these nations, and that's what it's going to be remembered for. And I think going forward, the integrity of the Paralympic movement could decrease after yesterday's decision, but I'm glad they overturned it today.
They've made the right choice, haven't they?
Ultimately.
Finally. But yes, as you say, I cannot imagine what it's like for the Ukrainian athletes. I mean, they will know people, I'm sure, back in Ukraine who are affected.
Friends and family who'll be fighting, undoubtedly.
OK, Ali, Richard, we really appreciate your time this morning.
Great to get your thoughts. Lots of you getting in touch with this. A few of you feel like it is unfair on the athletes who have trained and prepared so hard to be there, for the politicians to have caused them to do this. But David says, glad that common sense has prevailed. It's absolutely right to ban Russia. Imagine being a Ukrainian athlete and having to drop out of the Games because your aggressors' athletes are allowed to compete.
Yeah. It's interesting what you said about, and what we were just discussing about the status of those with disabilities in Russia. According to a Human Rights Watch report, nearly 30% of children with disabilities live in state orphanages, despite the fact that at least 95% of them were not orphans. They are only in the orphanage because they have a disability.
So their parents give them up at birth when they realise they've got a disability.
There's a sense of segregation and discrimination, which this highlights, and that if they had been allowed to compete, there would have been an argument that they are representing people who are otherwise hidden away.
Changing the perception of how they're seen in their own country.
But there is a bigger picture here, which is about the war in Ukraine, and the IPC has made that decision. Russian and Belarusian athletes will not be allowed to compete at the Winter Paralympic Games.